The film begins with Pedro and Jimmy, two brothers who live in the same house. Suddenly, they hear gunshots coming from the direction of the forest, so they decide to go and see what is happening. The next morning, when they reach the location, they find a man who has been cut in half. They hesitate between informing the landowner, Ruiz, or calling the police. They then discover that the dead man was carrying strange tools and a map marked with the location of Maria Elena's house. They arrive at the house, where the dogs behave in a very unusual way. They tell Maria about the man found in the forest, and she becomes extremely nervous. She explains that they had been waiting for him for a long time because he wanted to kill her son, Uriel. They go inside to see Uriel and are shocked by his disturbing condition. His entire body is swollen. His family believes he is possessed by the devil and hopes that someone will come and put an end to all of this. Maria also says they reported him a year ago. Pedro becomes very angry and goes to inform the authorities about what happened, but they ignore him and show no concern. Even when they are told that the health worker who was supposed to come has died, they are not surprised. Pedro and Jimmy leave and go to Ruiz, telling him everything that happened. Ruiz appears unstable and behaves strangely. Soon after, he runs toward Maria's house carrying a rifle, enters Uriel's room, and is horrified by his appearance. He wants to kill him immediately. Uriel starts insulting him, saying that even if he dies, he will be reborn in Ruiz's wife's womb and come back for him. Ruiz returns to his truck deep in thought. His wife, along with Pedro and Jimmy, arrive and try to ask him whether he did something reckless, but he reassures them. Ruiz then takes them with him, and they attempt to move Uriel, but he is extremely heavy and falls to the ground. Jimmy notices the ammunition, takes a bullet from it, and together they gather their strength and lift Uriel into the truck. They drive a long distance away from Ruiz's land. On the road, a small child suddenly appears in front of them. Ruiz almost hits him but swerves and keeps driving until they reach a very remote area. There, they are shocked to discover that Uriel fell out of the truck at the moment they avoided the child. Ruiz decides they will not go back, believing they are now far enough away and safe. They return home and begin to process everything that happened. Ruiz's wife starts screaming and pointing at a specific goat. Ruiz grabs his rifle and fires into the sky, causing all the goats to run away except for one, which remains standing. Ruiz approaches it while clearly not fully aware of himself and terrified. His wife begs him not to kill it with the gun, but Ruiz shoots it anyway. She then grabs an axe and kills Ruiz. She is also not fully conscious of her actions, and after that she turns the axe on herself and kills herself. Pedro and Jimmy sit in shock, thinking about everything that has happened. Suddenly, Maria's younger son arrives and tells them that Ruiz and his wife are dead, that his mother is missing and he cannot find her, and that they were wrong to take Uriel away from the house. He asks to stay the night with them because he is afraid to be alone. Jimmy refuses because the boy is carrying a gun. Pedro takes the gun from him and agrees to let the boy sleep in the shed outside, with the condition that he leaves in the morning and never comes back. Jimmy strongly disagrees, insisting that the boy's mother would never abandon him and that the child is lying to them. The next day, they decide to leave the house. Pedro goes to get his children, but his ex-wife has a restraining order that prevents him from approaching her or the kids. Her new husband, Leo, is there and refuses to let him in. Pedro pushes his way inside and strips off all his clothes. Sabrina comes downstairs, shocked to see him, and Leo brings him clothes. Pedro tries to convince them that evil is spreading through the town and that they need to leave immediately, but Sabrina does not believe him. She thinks he is lying and doing all of this just to take the children, and she refuses to listen. While they are arguing, Vicky is playing with the dog. Suddenly, the dog attacks her, bites her on the head, and starts mauling her viciously. Santino is horrified by the sight and runs after them, then calls out for his mother and father. They see the dog holding on to Vicky, and her father chases after it, but the dog is already too far away. Leo runs back into the house to grab a rifle, even though Pedro warns him not to kill the dog with bullets, because evil cannot be stopped with firearms. Leo ignores him, jumps into the car, and drives off. Pedro runs after him from another direction and encounters the police on the road, realizing that evil is already spreading through the town and that killing it with bullets will only make things worse. Pedro sees Leo's car ahead, but Leo has already gotten out and shot the dog with the rifle. Pedro immediately knows what is going to happen next. He rushes back home and starts getting everything ready. He brings down his son Jair, who is exhausted and has a form of autism. Meanwhile, Vicky returns to her mother completely unharmed, without a single scratch, which is extremely strange since the dog bit her on the head. Vicky happily tells her mother that her father will come back with the car and run her over. Sabrina is confused and terrified by the child's behavior. Sabrina sees Pedro leaving in her car with the children. Suddenly, Leo comes back at high speed and hits Sabrina, then drives to his mother's house. They take Sabrina with them and leave. She does not understand how he can see the children with her, but Pedro is in a hurry and tells her he will explain everything later. On the road, they explain the nature of the evil to her. She tells them there are 7 rules to prevent evil from entering their minds and taking control. First, never use electric lights. Second, never stay near animals. Third, never take anything that was close to the possessed. Fourth, never harm them in any way. The most important rule, never, ever say the evil's name. Another rule, never shoot them with firearms. Pedro loses his temper and tells her to stop talking. Jimmy says the 7th rule must be not to forget any of the previous rules. Throughout the trip, Jair is extremely uncomfortable and senses that something is wrong. Pedro stops at a store to buy the ice cream he promised them, but he does not have enough money, so he buys something else. Jair starts making loud noises and cannot calm down, because he will not settle until his father gives him exactly what he promised. Suddenly, Sabrina receives a call on her mother's phone. Santino grabs the phone from her hand and gets out of the car in the middle of the road to answer it. The voice on the other end sounds very strange. It insults him, tries to provoke him, and says it knows where he is and is coming to take the children from him. Santino breaks down crying and smashes the phone. His brother tries to comfort him, while Pedro breaks down as well, saying that he is the one who brought the evil to them, that this is why Sabrina died, and that the person on the phone was not really her. Jimmy tells them he knows a woman nearby who went through something similar before and might be able to help. They arrive at Myrta's place. She is Jimmy's former girlfriend and someone he has known for years. They tell her they have seen evil with their own eyes and that they are terrified, but she reassures them. That night, everyone goes to sleep. Pedro sleeps in the car with Jair because he cannot sleep. He looks at the picture that comforts Jair, showing people standing near the sun, then closes it and falls asleep. Later, Sabrina arrives at the location with her hands covered in blood. She approaches the window where Jair is, and he becomes terrified and starts making loud noises. She then leaves and takes Santino with her. The grandmother believes her daughter has arrived, but when she sees her face, she is horrified. Jimmy calls out to Pedro, who jumps out of the car and runs into the room, finding his wife in a disturbing state. Suddenly, she jumps off the balcony with Santino. Pedro runs after her, but she disappears. He returns to the car and finds it covered in blood, but Jair is still inside. Pedro asks Jimmy for flashlights, even though they are forbidden in cases of demonic possession. Jimmy brings them anyway. Myrta comes out and tells Jimmy to focus. She explains that the evil has entered Jair and points to his hand, showing that it is feeding on him. She tells them to bring Pedro into the house, because they do not know what they are dealing with. Inside, she explains that the demon takes control through the mind, and that the 7th rule is not to fear death. Myrta tells Pedro that it came and took Santino because he was afraid and believed the evil would take his children from him. She tells him to forget about Santino, because he will never be able to get him back. What matters now is finding Ariel and killing him so the evil cannot be born again. She explains that this is called the birth process. The essence has already been released and may not need a physical birth, so they must kill it as quickly as possible. She scolds them for being foolish enough to transport a possessed person when they knew what he was. They split up, each driving their own car toward the town. Mirta warns Jimmy that the city lights are completely out, which means something terrible has already happened, and tells him to be careful. She rides with Pedro and tells him how, years ago, she and her husband discovered a possessed person without realizing it. That person later turned on them and on the neighboring family, and devoured them all. After that, a group called the Cleaners appeared and taught her how to kill evil before it is born. That is what she did for 12 years before running away and leaving everything behind, because to escape evil, you must leave everything with it. Mirta wonders in fear what would happen if the evil found its way into Jimmy's mind, and whether it destroyed the entire town just to reach her. Pedro asks her why it took his son instead of her. She answers that it is because Pedro is the one who is afraid. Meanwhile, the grandmother is at home when she suddenly freezes in terror as she sees Jair walk in, speaking normally, asking her to prepare food and something warm because he is cold. On the road through the forest, Pedro sees Sabrina walking ahead. He drives closer and sees Santino dead while she is eating from his head. Pedro is devastated. He rushes toward her at full speed, crashes, and slams into a tree. He later reaches the outskirts and wants to continue on foot, but Mirta notices a school sign and realizes the evil must be there, because it loves children, and children are drawn to it as well. They arrive at the school and notice children inside standing completely still, frozen in place. They are terrified and sense someone watching them closely. They approach the children and try to ask about Uriel, but none of them speak. One girl behaves strangely and is clearly controlling the others. Mirta becomes overwhelmed by the smell and steps outside, while Pedro is confused because he does not smell anything. Suddenly, Pedro sees the boy on the tricycle, the same child they almost hit at the beginning of the film. He tries to ask him where Uriel is, but the boy does not answer. Pedro goes back into the school and tries to chase him down to force him to speak, but Mirta stops him, warning that it will only make things worse. The boy then comes out and says that Uriel is at Teacher Cortez's house near the intersection. Pedro immediately wants to go there, despite Mirta's warnings. He is reckless, blinded by desperation, and determined to get there at any cost. The girl who had been silent inside comes out and tells him the boy is lying, that Uriel is in her house because her father tried to help him. Pedro explodes in rage, opens the door, and attacks her. After that, he keeps hitting her in the face because he wants to know the truth. Mirta confirms that Uriel is indeed here, which is why they wanted to send them far away. She notices clear signs of possession on the girl's hands. They go back into the school, and this time Pedro finds the body of an adult man. Mirta is shocked, saying it is the first time she has ever seen something like this. She asks Pedro to go outside and bring her tools. The children are standing in front of him, and she tells him to move slowly, not to run or rush. When Pedro goes out, the girl starts talking and warning Mirta that they want to kill them and that they must leave the place immediately, because he has killed all the teachers and parents. She keeps screaming at them, but they ignore her. Pedro comes back with the tool, and Mirta assembles it. It turns out to be very similar to the tool carried by the man they found dead in the forest. Pedro opens the floor, while Mirta urges him to hurry so they can find Uriel. When they finally find him, Uriel asks Pedro to kill him, but Mirta tells Pedro not to listen and to stay focused on her, explaining that the only way to kill him is with her tool, and only that. She tells Pedro to pull him out, but Pedro cannot lift him. Mirta then explains that the blade she is holding must be driven into the back of his neck. The girl tells Pedro that there is an axe in the room that he can use to break the floor more easily. Uriel says that he is the reason behind everything that is happening. Mirta begs Pedro to stay with her, warning him that this is all a trap, but Pedro runs into the room to look for the axe. She begs him not to leave her alone. Suddenly, she screams, the door slams shut, and the children start hitting her on the head with hammers until they kill her. Pedro manages to open the door too late, and sees Uriel's head emerging from the opening. Uriel points at the tool lying on the ground. Pedro grabs it and strikes him on the head repeatedly until he dies and collapses. Suddenly, a child emerges from Uriel's body. In that moment, evil succeeds in being born through Pedro. The child marks Pedro's head, then walks outside with the other children, who begin following him. Pedro later returns home, where his brother is crying. They embrace each other, mourning their mother's death. They go back to their house. Jimmy enters the shed and finds the boy still sitting there. The boy tells him that he heard a voice in his head telling him to go and kill the man who was supposed to help them. He went to the forest, killed him, cut up his body, and fed it to the pigs. He also ate from the body himself. Jimmy asks him what happened to his mother, and the boy replies, "The same thing that happened to your mother." Jimmy is deeply shaken. Pedro goes to take a shower, but the mark on his head that the child left behind will not come off no matter what he does. It remains clearly visible. Afterward, Pedro lights a fire while Jair eats ice cream. Suddenly, Pedro hears choking sounds. When he looks at Jair, he sees that the spoon is in his mouth, so he pulls it out, but Jair is still choking. Pedro puts his hand into his mouth and begins pulling out a massive amount of hair. Then a chain falls out. Jair glances at him briefly. The moment Pedro sees the chain, he completely breaks down. It belonged to his mother. He realizes that Jair has eaten her. Pedro walks outside the house, collapses to the ground, and screams in agony, having lost everything. This is where the film ends. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.